Here we go, student practice. So we stopped yesterday with you practicing and going through the steps for this on your own, and we're going to pick up here to check and see how you did. So for your student practice, you had f of x equals 2x squared plus 4x minus 1. And you wanted to determine the graph, find the vertex, symmetry, graph, and all that good stuff. So the first thing you notice here, it says, is it up or down? Well, this opens up because our a is greater than 0. Our a is 2, okay? Then to find our vertex, remember your vertex, you need your h and your k. Your h equals negative b divided by 2a. So I have a, b, c. I'm going to plug in. I have negative 4 divided by 2 times 2, which is going to give me negative 1. So your h was negative 1. Negative 1 is fairly easy to plug in to find your k. So you can find your k by substitution. So k would equal f of negative 1. So I'm going to plug in negative 1 everywhere that there is an x. So we have 2 times negative 1 squared plus 4 times negative 1 minus 1. And that's going to give me 2 minus 4 minus 1, which gives me negative 2 minus 1, which gives me negative 3. So now I know that my vertex is at negative 1, negative 3. So I go to negative 1, negative 3, and that's my vertex. Okay, my y-intercept. Remember, your y-intercept is always your, in standard form, it's going to be your c value. And what is our c value? Negative 1. So y-intercept is done. I have my vertex. I have my axis of symmetry at x equals negative 1. Okay. I can find another point by reflecting my y-intercept across my axis of symmetry. So I have a second point here. And the last thing it wants to know, what are your x-intercepts? Your x-intercepts, we practiced that in 2.2. Obviously, you need more practice based on the quiz scores for 2.2. But you can use the quadratic formula. You could do factoring. You could do Xbox. Whatever you need to do to figure out here. So, for example, if I did factoring, I would ask myself, what's 2 times negative 1? What's 2 times negative 1? Negative 2, right? So if I was to do Xbox, I would have negative 2 and 4. What multiplies to give me negative 2, but adds to give me 4? Is there anything? Is it going to work? Can we think of anything friendly? If you can't think of anything friendly, then your safe bet is to do what? The quadratic formula. If I can't think of anything that's going to multiply to give me negative 2, but add to give me 4, then my last resort is the quadratic formula. So using the quadratic formula, x equals negative b plus, I want to do it in a different color, sorry. Let me switch colors. And we're going to do it in blue. All right, so I can't do Xbox because there's nothing that's going to work. So I'm going to do quadratic. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac divided by 2a. So I literally plug the numbers where the letters are in the formula. So we have negative 4 plus or minus the square root of 16 plus 8. What is 16 plus 8? 24 over 4. Okay, this right here is a decimal. What that tells me is that this is not going to be an exact value. So my x-intercept is going to be an approximation. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So I would have to use a calculator with a square root symbol to approximate. And you don't have to have a scientific, you just need a calculator with the square root symbol on it. So if I chose to use a standard, that's a calendar, not a calculator. A standard calculator, like on my phone or just on my computer, here's a basic calculator. And I'm doing negative 4 plus square root of 24 divided by 4. So I'm going to have negative 4. Hold on. Clear. 4 negative. Negative 4 plus, and I need the square root of, how do I do square root on this thing? Square root 24. There we go. That's didn't work. 24 square. I knew that. Just make sure you knew that. Okay. That is the square root of 24. All right. So we end up with 4.8999 roughly, right? 4.899. So now I do the math. So we have 4. And I have to add and I have to subtract. So I'm going to do plus 4.899 and divide by 4. So one x value is some change, some 0.225, right? 225 thousandths roughly. That's adds up. And then the other one's going to become from -4. This time I am subtracting 4. Was it 4? And 899. Yep. And then we're dividing by 4. And my other one is roughly at -2.22475. Okay. Which makes sense because if I was to trace this out, I should be here somewhere. And I should be here somewhere, right? So when I follow the quadratic, oh man, I am doing really good. Okay, that's as good as it's gonna get for y'all. But there's my quadratic. So looking at this quadratic, what is the domain?
Negative infinity to positive infinity.
Exactly. Our domain is all real numbers. We go from negative infinity to positive infinity. And what is my range? -3 to infinity. Okay. Determine the increase and decrease, intervals of increase. You read a graph like you read a book from left to right. So from left to right, what am I doing here? Decreasing. So I decrease from negative infinity up until where my axis of symmetry is, which is -1. It's always based off of your x. And then I'm going to increase from -1 to infinity. Okay. We did have to use a standard calculator to help us with the square root, but other than that, you graph solely by yourself. Does that make sense? All right. How do we feel? Questions, comments, concerns? I'm not a mind reader, so you got to communicate.
Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot to ask you
Uh-huh.
for the other one. For no real intercept, it just means there's no x intercept, right?
Yes, they're imaginary because it's floating.
Yes.
Yeah, I fixed that one. I realized I gave you all the wrong problem, but it's all right. It's all good. All right, so the last part is 2.3c. It should be at the bottom. And the part of objective of 2.3 is finding a quadratic given its vertex and one other point. Okay, so given the vertex and one other point. Here we have, given the vertex HK and one additional point on the graph of a quadratic, f of x equals ax squared plus bx plus c, where a cannot equal 0, we can use f of x equals a parentheses x minus h squared plus k to obtain the quadratic function. So you're writing down your two forms. So you're writing your standard. So this is standard, remember? And this is vertex form. So as long as you know the vertex and one additional point, you can easily find the quadratic function. So in the blanks, again, you're writing down standard and vertex forms. Good? What are you writing? Oh, so because you weren't paying attention, we got to pause. Boy. All right. Also, you can look on your other paper for those. So here we go. It says, find the quadratic function given this vertex and one other point. Determine the quadratic function whose vertex is -2, 3, and whose y-intercept is 1. Okay. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to, you're going to identify your H, your K, your given X and Y. So we're going to identify H, K, and given X and Y. So for this problem, our H equals -2, our K equals 3, our X equals 0, and our Y equals 1. Do you know where those values come from? Because it says intercept. So if my Y-intercept is 1, that means the value of X has to be 0. Okay? Still with me on identifying? After you identify, you're going to substitute values into vertex form. So again, vertex form is Y equals A times X minus H squared plus K. So we're going to substitute all the values we have into the vertex form. So switching to red, we have that Y is what? 1 equals, we don't have an A. We know that X is 0. We know that H is -2, and we know that K is +3. Questions about substituting the values in? No? Okay. Step 3 is to solve for A. So step 3, you're going to solve for A. So what do I need to do to solve for A? Anyone?
Subtract 3.
Okay, we're getting somewhere. We're going to subtract 3. When I subtract 3, I'm left with -2 equals A times 2 squared. Okay, what's left to do? What's 2 squared? Yeah, you said do the square root.
That's what I meant.
Oh, I was like, what?
4.
4. So what is going to happen with this 4, though? I'm going to do what? I'm going to divide by 4. The reason why I'm dividing by 4 is because this is multiplication, right? Because in your do now, you have to define a variable and a coefficient, right? And this is the variable and this is the coefficient. So this is implied multiplication. All right. So you're due now from Tuesday, by the way, in case you didn't do it. That was the due now. All right. So we're going to divide by 4. And what is A? A equals -1/2. Okay. Questions about step 3? Doable? Okay. And then step 4 is to substitute. You can write plug in if you want values into the function. Into function. F of X equals A times X minus H squared plus K. Okay, because I said function, that means you're not plugging in your X and your Y, only your A, H, and K, the other variables, the parameters, not variables in this case. So then, therefore, what is my F of X? F of X equals, so it's A, -1/2. What's H? So it's going to make it A positive, and what's K? 3. So your function is F of X equals -1/2 times X plus 2 squared plus 3.
When is the
Monday night. All right, so looking at this, if I wanted to go from vertex to standard, what would I do? If it asks for not in vertex form, but in standard form, what would I need to do? It's in Vertex. How would I take that to standard? What does a square mean you have? If something's to the power of 2, that means I have 2 of them, right?
Oh,
Yeah. So if it asks for me to go into standard, I would have to expand and distribute and combine like terms. So if this needed to go into standard form, I would have to do -1/2 times x plus 2 times x plus 2 plus 3. And then you distribute and combine like terms, okay? That would lead you into your standard form. Do we understand that or not? I see a lot of confusion and breaks my heart a little bit.
wait.
Vertex is standard.
Yes, this is vertex form, but if I want to go to standard, I would have to expand, get rid of the parentheses, get rid of the square, and then you would do the math. Okay.
Oh, that makes sense.
All right. Okay. Any questions about the 4 steps? Shh, that's 4-step questions. None. Yes, maybe so. Okay. All right. Maximum or minimum. All right. When you're identifying the maximum or minimum, there's 2 steps. One is identify your A. Is your A positive or negative? 2, find your vertex. Okay. So the first thing we're going to do is identify our A. What does A equal? -1, which is less than 0. Because A is less than 0, we know that we're going to have a maximum. Does that make sense? If A was greater than 0, then we would have a what? Minimum. Okay, so that's step 1. Then step 2 is to find your vertex. So to find the vertex, remember H equals what? -B over 2A. So again, we have our A, our B, and our C. So I'm going to plug in -4 divided by 2 times -1. What is that? 2. So I have my H. Now I need to find my K. I either can use the formula 4AC minus B squared divided by 4A, or just plug it in because it's an easy number. F of 2 gives me what? So we have -2 squared plus 4 times 2 plus 5. That gives me -4 plus 8 plus 5, which equals 4 plus 5, which equals 9. Okay, so I have a max, and my max value is 9. How do you feel about finding the max or min? Doable? So again, identify the A. If it's less than, I'm going to have a max. If it's greater than 0, I'm going to have a min, and then you find what that value is. Questions, comments, concerns about maximum or minimum? No? Sure? All right. That concludes our notes.